The city looks different at night. That's something you learn quickly when you drive a taxi. The gleaming skyscrapers that stand so proud during the day become looming sentinels in the darkness. The busy streets that buzz with life become hollow channels where shadows play tricks on tired eyes. My name is Daniel Reeves. I've been driving a cab in Chicago for nearly 15 years now. It pays the bills most months anyway. But that night in October, the night that changed everything, I wasn't thinking about bills, or fares, or tips. I was just thinking about home. About my empty apartment, the leftover pasta in the fridge, and the blessed relief of silence after 12 hours of city noise. The dashboard clock read 2:17 a.m. when I turned onto Lakeshore Drive, taking the long way home to clear my head. Rain had started to fall, not the gentle kind, but the angry Chicago downpour that makes the road shine like black glass. My windshield wipers squeaked with each pass, a metronome counting down the minutes until I could finally rest. I almost missed her. A flicker of movement on the side of the road, so still at first I thought she might be a shadow cast by one of the trees. But then she moved again and I realized it was a person, a woman huddled against the night. Something made me stop. Call it instinct, call it conscience. In 15 years of night driving, I'd seen plenty of people who needed help and I'd learned which situations were safe to involve myself in and which weren't. But something about her stillness, her vulnerability in the driving rain, made me pull over. When my headlights illuminated her fully, I felt my chest tighten. She was young, maybe mid-20s, drenched to the bone in a thin jacket that did nothing against the October chill. Her dark hair plastered against her pale face, which was contorted in pain. And she was pregnant, very pregnant, one hand clutching her swollen belly. I rolled down my window. "Miss? You need help." Her eyes met mine, wide with fear and something else, desperation. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Hospital." I didn't hesitate. I jumped out of my cab, not bothering with an umbrella, and helped her into the back seat. She was lighter than she should have been, considering her condition. Too thin, despite the pregnancy. As she settled into the seat, gasping with the effort, I noticed her hands were dirty, her nails broken. There were no bags, no possessions. "Which hospital?" I asked, already pulling away from the curb. "Nearest," she managed through clenched teeth. "Baby's coming." I hit the gas and turned on my emergency lights. Northwestern Memorial was 7 minutes away in this traffic, 5 if I pushed it. "Hang on," I told her. "I'll get you there." Her eyes fixed on mine in the rearview mirror. Deep brown, filled with pain but also something else, a fierce determination. "Thank you," she said quietly. Those 2 words carried more weight than they should have. As I sped through the rain-slicked streets, navigating the fastest route to the hospital, I tried not to worry about the small gasps of pain coming from my back seat. I'm not a religious man, but I found myself praying anyway. For her, for the baby, for whatever circumstances had led her to be alone on a deserted road in the middle of the night. We made it to the emergency entrance in just under 6 minutes. I hardly had time to stop the car before nurses and orderlies were rushing out with a wheelchair. Someone must have called ahead when they saw my cab racing up with the flashers on. "She's in labor," I told a nurse as they helped the woman into the wheelchair. "Found her on Lakeshore Drive, all alone." The nurse, a stocky woman with kind eyes and efficient movements, nodded at me. "You did good bringing her in. She's in distress." As they wheeled her away, the woman reached out and grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Your name?" she asked, her face tight with another contraction. "Daniel," I told her. "Daniel," she repeated as if committing it to memory. "I'm Eliza." "Thank you." Then they whisked her through the automatic doors and she was gone. I stood there in the rain for a moment, water running down my face, feeling strangely adrift. In my line of work, you learn not to get involved. You drive people where they need to go, you take their money, and you move on to the next fare. But something about Eliza stayed with me as I drove home in the lightning rain. By the time I reached my apartment in Rogers Park, it was nearly 3:30 a.m. I trudged up 3 flights of stairs, my uniform damp and clinging uncomfortably to my skin. The fluorescent lights in the hallway flickered as I fumbled with my keys, casting sickly shadows across the worn carpet. My apartment welcomed me with familiar silence. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, and a living room that doubled as my office. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I heated up the pasta, ate standing at the counter, then took a hot shower before collapsing into bed. As I drifted off to sleep, Eliza's face floated before me, those determined eyes, the whispered thank you. I wondered if she'd had her baby yet. I wondered if she had anyone waiting for her, anyone to hold her hand through the pain. I never expected to see her again. And I certainly never expected what happened next. The pounding on my door dragged me from a dreamless sleep. Harsh, insistent knocks that seemed to rattle the entire apartment. I blinked at my bedside clock, 9:47 a.m. I'd been asleep for barely 5 hours. The knocking continued, more forceful now. Groggily, I pulled on a t-shirt and sweatpants. Coming, I called, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Hold on a minute. Through the peephole, I could see 3 men in dark suits standing outside my door. My first thought was that they were police detectives. I'd had run-ins with those before in my line of work. But something about their posture, the way they stood too straight, too alert, told me these weren't cops. I hesitated, suddenly wide awake and wary. Then one of them knocked again, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. I opened the door, keeping the chain on. Can I help you? The man in front, tall, broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes like chips of ice, smiled without warmth. Mr. Daniel Reeves? Something cold settled in my stomach. Who's asking? He reached into his jacket and pulled out an ID badge that he flashed too quickly for me to read. I'm Agent Brooks. These are my colleagues, Agents Mercer and Daniels. We need to speak with you regarding an incident from last night. I'm not talking to anyone until I see some real identification, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Brooks's smile tightened. Mr. Reeves, I suggest you cooperate. It would be in your best interest. Through the crack in the door, I could see past them to the hallway window. Outside, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows were parked in front of my building. A man in a suit stood beside each one, sunglasses on despite the cloudy day. My heart hammered against my ribs. I want to see badges. Real ones. And I want to know what agency you're with. Brooks looked at his companions, then back at me. His fake smile disappeared. We're not here to harm you, Mr. Reeves. We're here because you came into contact with a person of significant interest last night. A young woman. We need to know exactly what she told you. Eliza. This was about Eliza. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied, stalling for time. I drove dozens of people last night. A pregnant woman, Brooks said flatly. You took her to Northwestern Memorial around 2:30 a.m. We have you on traffic cameras. My mouth went dry. I need to get dressed, I said. Give me 5 minutes. Brooks nodded. 5 minutes. Then we come in, whether you're ready or not. I closed the door, heart pounding in my ears. Through the thin walls of my apartment, I could hear them talking in low voices. I grabbed my phone, thinking to call 911, but then hesitated. What if they were legitimate federal agents? What if calling the police made things worse? I pulled on jeans and a clean shirt, trying to think. What had I gotten myself into? Who was Eliza, really? And why were these men agents, or whatever they were, at my door asking about her? When I opened the door again, fully dressed this time, Brooks smiled that same cold smile. May we come in? It wasn't really a question. I stepped aside and all 3 men entered my apartment. They seemed to fill the small space completely, making it hard to breathe. Brooks took a seat on my couch without being invited. The other 2 remained standing, one by the door, one by the window. Blocking the exits, I realized with a sinking feeling. So, Brooks said conversationally, tell me about the woman. I sat in the armchair across from him, trying to appear calmer than I felt. There's not much to tell. I found her on Lakeshore Drive around 2:15 a.m. She was in labor. I took her to the hospital. That's it. And she didn't say anything to you during this ride? No names, no information about herself. I thought about Eliza's hand gripping mine, her voice saying my name. She told me her name was Eliza. That's all. Brooks's eyes narrowed slightly. Eliza, he repeated as if testing the name. Nothing else? Think carefully, Mr. Reeves. The smallest detail could be important. I shook my head. She was in pain. We barely spoke. Brooks exchanged glances with his colleagues. Mr. Reeves, he said, leaning forward. The woman you helped last night is not who you think she is. Her name isn't Eliza. It's Isabel Winters. And she's involved in a matter of national security. The name meant nothing to me. I stared at him blankly. Isabel Winters, Brooks continued, was until recently employed as a data analyst at Meridian Technologies. Are you familiar with Meridian? I shook my head, though the name sounded vaguely familiar. Some big tech company, I thought. Meridian develops security systems for the government, Brooks explained. Ms. Winters had access to sensitive information. 3 weeks ago, she disappeared with classified data that could compromise several ongoing operations. I blinked, trying to process this. You're saying she's some kind of spy? Brooks's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. No, Mr. Reeves. I'm saying she's a thief and a traitor. And by helping her, you've potentially made yourself an accessory. The cold feeling in my stomach spread. I just took her to the hospital. She was having a baby, for God's sake. A convenient cover, said one of the other men, Mercer, I thought. Makes her look vulnerable. Makes people like you want to help her. I stood up, anger cutting through my fear. Are you seriously suggesting she got pregnant as part of some espionage scheme? That's insane. Sit down, Mr. Reeves, Brooks said quietly. There was steel in his voice now. I remained standing. No. I want to see some real identification. Now. Or I'm calling the police. Brooks sighed as if dealing with a difficult child. We don't have time for this. Ms. Winters is dangerous and what she has taken is valuable. If you know anything about where she might go next, who might be helping her, you need to tell us now. I told you everything, I insisted. I picked her up, I took her to the hospital, that's it. Now please leave. Brooks stood, towering over me. I don't think you understand the seriousness of this situation. People who interfere with national security matters face severe consequences. Obstruction charges. Prison time. Fear clawed at my throat, but I held my ground. I'm not obstructing anything. I've told you what I know. Brooks studied me for a long moment, then nodded to his colleagues. We'll be in touch, he said. Don't leave town. Just like that, they filed out of my apartment. I locked the door behind them, then sank to the floor, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me. Through my window, I watched the black SUVs pull away from the curb, disappearing into the morning traffic. What had I gotten myself into? I couldn't settle after they left. Their visit had left me with a crawling sensation under my skin, like ants marching along my spine. I paced my small apartment, replaying my encounter with Eliza, or Isabel, if that was really her name. Had she seemed suspicious? Dangerous? No, she'd seemed terrified and in pain. A woman about to give birth alone on a rainy night. Nothing about her had triggered my cab driver's internal alarm, honed by years of picking up strangers. I remembered her hand gripping mine, those determined eyes. Daniel, she'd said, committing my name to memory. Had there been more to that moment than gratitude? My phone rang, making me jump. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, it rang again. Same unknown number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Mr. Reeves. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. This is Nurse Garcia from Northwestern Memorial. We have a patient here who's asking for you. She says you helped her last night. My pulse quickened. Eliza? Is she okay? The baby? Both mother and daughter are doing well, the nurse said. She's asking if you could visit. She says it's important. I hesitated, thinking of Brooks and his warnings. I don't know if that's a good idea. She's quite insistent, the nurse said. She says she needs to explain something to you. In person. I closed my eyes, weighing my options. If Brooks was telling the truth, Isabel was dangerous. Getting further involved could put me at risk. But if he was lying... Mr. Reeves, the nurse prompted. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said, making my decision. As I hung up, I noticed movement outside my window. A black sedan was parked across the street, and even from this distance, I could make out a figure sitting in the driver's seat. Watching my building. They were still surveilling me. Which meant if I was going to the hospital, I needed to be careful. I grabbed my jacket and wallet, then hesitated. On an impulse, I took my phone and removed the battery, something I'd seen in a movie once. Then I left through the back entrance of my building, cutting through alleyways until I reached the L station 3 blocks over. The hospital was busy when I arrived, the emergency room full of the usual weekend chaos. I approached the information desk, asking for Eliza. The receptionist looked confused. Eliza who? She was brought in last night, around 2:30 a.m., I explained. In labor. Nurse Garcia just called me. The woman tapped at her computer. We don't have a Nurse Garcia and there's no patient named Eliza admitted last night at that time. My stomach dropped. Try Isabel Winters. More typing. The receptionist shook her head. No one by that name either. I was about to argue when a voice behind me said Daniel Reeves. I turned to find a young woman in scrubs watching me. She wasn't wearing a name tag. Yes, I said cautiously. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. Come with me. She's waiting. I followed her through a series of corridors, my suspicion growing with each turn. This didn't feel right. We ended up in a part of the hospital that seemed less trafficked, perhaps an administrative wing. The nurse swiped a keycard at a nondescript door, then gestured me inside. She'll explain everything, the woman said, then closed the door behind me. The room was small, with no windows. A conference room of sorts, with a table and several chairs. And sitting there, cradling a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket, was Eliza. She looked different in the harsh fluorescent light, her face pale but composed, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore hospital scrubs and her expression when she saw me was a mixture of relief and wariness. Daniel, she said softly. You came. What's going on? I demanded, staying by the door. Who are you really? She adjusted the baby in her arms. A tiny face, eyes closed in sleep, peeked out from the blanket. "My name is Isabel Winters," she said. "But I prefer Eliza now. It's safer." "Safer from who?" "The men who came to my apartment this morning." Her eyes widened. "They found you already? How much did they tell you?" "That you stole classified data from your employer. That you're a thief and a traitor. That I could go to prison for helping you." My voice rose with each accusation. "Please," she whispered, glancing at the sleeping baby. "You'll wake her." I lowered my voice but didn't soften my tone. "Tell me what's going on. Now. Or I'm walking out that door and calling the real police." Eliza, Isabel, took a deep breath. "Everything they told you is a lie." "Yes, I worked for Meridian Technologies. Yes, I had access to classified data. But I didn't steal it, I discovered it. Information about illegal surveillance programs, about violations of privacy laws on a massive scale." "You're a whistleblower," I said, understanding dawning. She nodded. "I tried to go through proper channels. I reported what I found to my supervisors. That's when things started to get strange. I was followed. My apartment was broken into. Then I discovered I was pregnant." "The baby's father?" A shadow crossed her face. "My fiancé. He died 6 months ago. Car accident that didn't feel like an accident." I sank into a chair across from her. "So you ran?" "I had to," she said simply. "For my baby. For myself." I had evidence of what Meridian was doing, working with a shadow division of intelligence services. Unauthorized surveillance, data collection beyond what's legally permitted. I needed to get it to people who could expose it safely. "And did you?" "Get it to the right people." She smiled faintly. "I'm working on it. There are journalists, attorneys who specialize in these cases. But Meridian has resources, connections. They branded me a thief to discredit whatever I might reveal." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process everything. "So the men who came to my apartment, they're not federal agents?" "They might have badges," Eliza said grimly. "Real ones, even. But they're not acting under official orders. They're protecting Meridian and the government contracts worth billions that would be at risk if what I know became public." The baby stirred in her arms, making tiny mewling sounds. Eliza rocked her gently. "What's her name?" I asked, my anger softening at the sight of the newborn. "Hope," Eliza said quietly. I named her Hope. The simplicity of it struck me. This woman, running for her life, carrying evidence that could bring down powerful people, had still maintained enough optimism to name her child Hope. "Why am I here, Eliza?" I asked finally. "What do you want from me?" She met my eyes steadily. "I need your help, Daniel. Just one more time. Then I promise you'll be free of this." "What kind of help?" "I need to disappear," she said. "Hope and I. There are people waiting to help us, people who can protect us while we build a case. But we need to reach them, and I can't use public transportation. They'll be watching." I shook my head. "You want me to drive you?" "After those men visited my apartment, they're probably watching my cab." "Not your cab," she agreed. "But there are other ways." She reached into a bag beside her chair and pulled out a set of keys. "My friend, the nurse who brought you here, her car is in the staff parking garage. She's letting us borrow it." I stared at the keys. "This is crazy. I'm a cab driver, not a getaway driver." "I understand if you say no," Eliza said softly. "You've already done more than I had any right to ask. But I have no one else, Daniel. And these people, they won't stop. What they're protecting is worth too much." I thought about Brooks, his cold eyes and threatening manner. I thought about Eliza on the side of the road, alone in the rain. And I thought about the baby sleeping in her arms, oblivious to the danger surrounding her. "Where do you need to go?" I asked finally. Relief flooded her face. "Wisconsin. A town called Blue River. It's about 3 hours from here." "And then what?" "Then you drive back, return the car, and go home. Resume your life. If anyone asks, you never saw me again after dropping me at the hospital." It sounded simple. Too simple. But as I looked at Eliza and her daughter, I knew I couldn't walk away. "When do we leave?" I asked. "Now," she said. "Before they realize I'm gone." The nurse's car was a nondescript blue Honda Civic, the kind of vehicle that disappears in traffic. Eliza had a car seat for Hope, and within 20 minutes of my decision we were on Lakeshore Drive heading north. Rain had started again, a steady drizzle that blurred the world beyond our windshield. Eliza sat in the back with Hope, who was asleep again after being fed. "How did you end up on the side of the road last night?" I asked, breaking the tense silence. "Why weren't you already somewhere safe?" Eliza sighed. I had a place in Rogers Park, off the grid. But yesterday morning I spotted one of them watching the building. I packed what I could carry and slipped out the back. Spent the day moving, trying to stay ahead of them. Then the contractions started. "Why didn't you call someone?" An ambulance? Too risky. They monitor emergency calls. And I was afraid. She looked down at Hope. I thought I could make it to a friend's place in Evanston, but the labor progressed too quickly. I was trying to find a safe place to call from when you found me. Lucky for you I took the scenic route home, I muttered. Not luck, Eliza said quietly. I believe some things happen for a reason. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't sure I believed in any grand design. 15 years of driving a cab had shown me too much random cruelty for that. We drove in silence for a while, merging onto I-94 northbound. The traffic was light for a Saturday, the rain keeping people home. I kept one eye on the rearview mirror, watching for black SUVs or sedans. Tell me about your evidence, I said finally. What exactly did you find at Meridian? Eliza hesitated. The less you know, the safer you are. I'm driving you across state lines while men with guns look for you, I pointed out. I think I'm already pretty involved. She was quiet for a moment. Meridian developed a surveillance system called Argus for the government. Officially, it monitors foreign communications for security threats. But I discovered they were using it domestically too, without warrants. Collecting data on American citizens, building profiles, tracking movements through cell phones, smart devices, anything connected to the internet. Isn't that illegal? Extremely. And it gets worse. They were using the data to predict behavior, to flag people as potential threats based on algorithms. People were losing jobs, being denied loans, even detained for questioning, and they never knew why. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. And you have proof of this? Files, emails, code? Enough to expose the whole program. She touched her chest where I imagined the evidence was hidden somehow. Enough to bring down a lot of powerful people. We fell silent again as I processed this. The rain intensified, thundering on the roof of the car. I turned the wipers to high and reduced our speed slightly. Daniel, Eliza said suddenly, her voice tight. I think we're being followed. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. A black sedan was about 4 car lengths behind us, keeping pace despite the worsening weather. How long has it been there? I asked, heart hammering. I noticed it about 10 minutes ago. I wasn't sure at first. I changed lanes. The sedan changed lanes too. Hold on, I said, pressing the accelerator. The Honda responded sluggishly, nowhere near as nimble as my cab. I weaved through traffic, putting several cars between us and the sedan. Did we lose them? Eliza asked, craning her neck to look back. Before I could answer, headlights appeared in my mirror again. The sedan was gaining. No, I said grimly. But I know these roads. We're getting off the highway. I took the next exit without signaling, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic and earning a chorus of honks. The sedan followed, closer now. There's a turnoff ahead, I told Eliza. A service road I used to use as a shortcut. It's unmarked. The service road appeared suddenly, half hidden by overgrown vegetation. I turned sharply, tires squealing on the wet pavement. The Honda fishtailed before straightening out. In my mirror I saw the sedan's speed past the turnoff, unable to react in time. A small victory, but it wouldn't last long. The service road was narrow and poorly maintained, full of potholes that jarred us with each impact. Hope woke and began to cry, a high wail that pierced the tension. Shoo, baby girl, Eliza soothed her. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. We were being hunted and I had no idea how they'd found us. Had they followed me from my apartment? Had they been watching the hospital? The service road ended at a T-junction with a county road. I turned right, heading deeper into the rural outskirts north of Chicago. Do you still want to go to Wisconsin? I asked Eliza. They might expect that now. She was silent for a moment, rocking Hope. No, she finally said. You're right. We need a different plan. She thought for a moment. My contact, the one in Blue River. I could call her, see if she can meet us somewhere else. Use my phone, I said, handing it to her. I took the battery out earlier, but it should be safe for a quick call. Eliza reassembled the phone with one hand, cradling Hope with the other. She dialed from memory, waiting tensely. It's me, she said when someone answered. There's been a complication. We need a new meeting point. She listened for a moment. How far? Okay, we can be there in 2 hours if we push it. She hung up and returned my phone. There's a town called Belmont, about 90 miles west of here. She'll meet us at a diner there called Maggie's. It's on the main street, can't miss it. I nodded, already calculating the route in my head. We'd need to stick to back roads, avoid the highways where they'd be looking for us. Who is this contact? I asked. Can we trust her? Her name is Catherine. She's a lawyer who specializes in whistleblower cases. And yes, we can trust her. She's been helping me for months. The rain was letting up slightly as we drove west, following a zigzagging route through small towns and farming communities. I kept an eye out for black vehicles, but so far we seemed to be alone on the road. Tell me about your life, Daniel, Eliza said suddenly. Before all this, I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, surprised by the question. Not much to tell. 15 years driving a cab. Before that, I was in school. Thought I might be an architect, but life had other plans. No family. Parents died when I was in my 20s. No siblings. Was married once briefly. Didn't work out. I'm sorry, she said softly. I shrugged. It's not a bad life. I meet interesting people. See the city from a different angle than most. You're a good man, Eliza said. Most people wouldn't have stopped for me last night. And they certainly wouldn't be doing this now. I didn't know how to respond to that. Was I a good man, or just a fool who couldn't mind his own business? The line seemed blurry at the moment. We drove in comfortable silence for another hour, making steady progress westward. The sky cleared gradually, revealing patches of blue between scudding clouds. Hope had fallen asleep again after being fed, and Eliza looked on the verge of dozing off herself, the exhaustion of childbirth and fear finally catching up to her. That's when I saw the roadblock. It appeared suddenly as we crested a hill, 2 black SUVs parked diagonally across the road, lights flashing. Men in dark suits stood beside them, and I recognized Brooks's tall figure among them. Eliza, I said urgently. Wake up. We've got trouble. Her eyes snapped open, instantly alert. She took in the scene ahead, her face paling. How did they find us? I was already slowing down, looking for options. There were none. Thick forest bordered the road on both sides, with no visible turnoffs. We couldn't go forward, and turning around would only delay the inevitable. The phone, Eliza said suddenly. They must have tracked the call. Of course. I'd been an idiot to think removing the battery would be enough. We were still rolling forward, now less than 100 yards from the roadblock. Brooks had spotted us. He stepped forward, hand raised in a command to stop. What do we do? Eliza whispered, clutching Hope tighter. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. Trust me, I said, and pressed the accelerator to the floor. The Honda surged forward, engine whining in protest. Brooks's eyes widened as he realized what I was doing. He shouted something to the others, who scrambled to take cover. Hold on. I yelled to Eliza, aiming for the narrow gap between one of the SUVs and the edge of the road. Brooks drew a gun, confirming my suspicions that these weren't normal federal agents, but he didn't fire. They wanted Eliza and her evidence alive. We hit the gap at nearly 60 miles per hour. The Honda scraped against the SUV with a horrific screech of metal on metal, sparks flying. For a terrifying moment, I thought we would get stuck, but then we were through, fishtailing wildly before I regained control. In the rearview mirror, I saw Brooks and his men rushing to their vehicles. They would be after us within seconds. Are you okay? I called to Eliza. We're fine, she answered, her voice shaky but determined. That was unexpected. I'm full of surprises, I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, adrenaline surging through my system. We had a lead, but it wouldn't last. The Honda was damaged, the right side crumpled, and I could feel it pulling to the right. We needed a new plan. There's a town coming up, I said, spotting a sign. Riverdale, 2 miles. We need to ditch this car. Riverdale turned out to be little more than a crossroads with a gas station, a diner, and a few scattered houses. I pulled into the gas station, parking the damaged Honda behind the building, out of sight from the road. Now what? Eliza asked, gathering Hope and the small bag of supplies she'd brought from the hospital. I was already looking around, assessing our options. The gas station was quiet, just one attendant inside reading a magazine. And parked at the air pump was our salvation. An older model pickup truck, keys dangling from the ignition while its owner was inside paying. Come on, I said, making my decision. And walk normally. We crossed to the truck as casually as we could. I helped Eliza into the passenger seat, then climbed behind the wheel. The keys were indeed in the ignition, a stroke of luck we desperately needed. Daniel, Eliza said hesitantly, we're stealing this truck. Borrowing, I corrected, starting the engine. We'll leave it somewhere it can be found. I pulled out of the gas station just as a man came running out, shouting and waving his arms. In my rearview mirror, I saw him pull out a phone, no doubt calling the police. Great, I muttered. Now we've got local cops after us too. How far to Belmont? Eliza asked. About 40 miles, I estimated. But we can't go there now. Not directly. They'll be watching the roads. I turned onto a dirt track that led into the forest, hoping to lose ourselves in the network of logging roads I could see on the truck's ancient GPS system. The pickup handled the rough terrain better than the Honda would have, bouncing along as we penetrated deeper into the woods. "I'm sorry," Eliza said suddenly, "for all of this, for dragging you into my mess." I glanced at her, at the baby in her arms. "Don't be. I made my choices." "Why?" she asked. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know me." It was a question I'd been asking myself since I decided to visit her at the hospital. "Because you needed help," I said simply. "And because those men, Brooks and his people, they're the kind that think they can intimidate anyone who gets in their way. I've spent my whole life avoiding trouble, keeping my head down. Maybe I got tired of it." Eliza studied me, her dark eyes thoughtful. "Still, you're risking everything for us." Before I could respond, headlights appeared in my mirror, bouncing through the trees behind us. The SUVs had found us. "Hold on," I warned, pressing the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, engine roaring as we sped along the rough track. Branches whipped at the windows, and we bounced violently over roots and rocks. The SUVs were gaining, their powerful engines and four-wheel drive giving them an advantage on this terrain. I pushed the truck harder, taking risks I wouldn't normally consider. "There's a fork ahead," Eliza said, pointing through the windshield. "Left or right?" I made a split-second decision. Left. The track narrowed as we turned, barely wide enough for the truck. Perfect. The SUVs would have a harder time navigating this. But my triumph was short-lived. The track ended abruptly at a small clearing beside a stream. A dead end. "Daniel!" Eliza's voice was tight with fear. I cut the engine and thought fast. The SUVs were still coming, the sound of their engines growing louder. "We can't outrun them," I said. "So we hide." We scrambled out of the truck. Eliza clutched Hope, who was mercifully quiet, perhaps sensing the danger. "This way," I whispered, leading them to the stream. It was shallow but fast-moving, about 15 feet across. "We need to cross. It'll mask our scent if they bring dogs." We waded through the cold water, reaching the other side just as the first SUV broke into the clearing. I pulled Eliza behind a large fallen tree, and we crouched there, barely breathing. From our hiding place, we could see Brooks and his men examining the truck, their faces grim in the fading afternoon light. One of them pointed to the stream, and Brooks nodded. "They know we crossed," Eliza whispered. "But they don't know which way we went after that," I replied. "We need to move." Quietly, staying low, we crept away from the stream, deeper into the forest. Hope began to fuss, and Eliza quickly fed her to keep her quiet. The baby seemed to understand the urgency, nursing silently as we made our way through the underbrush. The forest grew darker as evening approached. We had no flashlights, no supplies, and no clear destination. But at least we'd lost our pursuers for the moment. "We need to find a road," I said after we'd been walking for about an hour. "Somewhere we can hitchhike or find help." Eliza nodded, her face pale with exhaustion. She hadn't complained once, despite having given birth less than 24 hours ago. Her strength amazed me. We reached the edge of the forest as the last light faded from the sky. Below us lay a small valley, and in the distance, the twinkling lights of what appeared to be a small town. "That must be Westfield," I said, recognizing the area from my mental map. "About 5 miles from here." "I don't know if I can walk that far," Eliza admitted, her voice barely audible. I looked at her properly for the first time since we'd left the truck. She was swaying slightly, dark circles under her eyes. Hope was asleep in her arms, oblivious to our predicament. "You don't have to," I said. "Wait here. Rest. I'll go into town and find help." "No," she said immediately. "We stay together. I just need a moment." I helped her sit on a fallen log, and she closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. In that moment, with the moonlight silvering her face, I realized how young she was. No more than 30, carrying burdens no one should have to bear. "Tell me about the evidence," I said, hoping conversation might distract her from her exhaustion. "What exactly did you discover at Meridian?" Eliza's eyes opened, and she looked at me warily. "I told you, the less you know. The safer I am, I finished. But I think we're past that now, don't you? She sighed. It started with anomalies in the code. I was doing a routine security audit when I noticed unauthorized access protocols. Backdoors essentially built into the Argus system. Backdoors for who? That's what I wanted to know. I traced them to a private server cluster operating outside official channels. They were siphoning data, massive amounts of it, from the main Argus database. And what were they doing with it? Eliza stroked Hope's cheek gently. Building profiles. Not just on suspected terrorists or foreign agents, but on everyday Americans. Political activists, journalists, even judges and lawmakers. Anyone who might pose a threat to certain interests. What kind of interests? Corporate, mainly. Meridian has ties to dozens of major companies, defense contractors, tech giants. They were using the surveillance data to predict and neutralize threats to their business models. Union organizers finding their bank accounts frozen. Environmental activists being denied flights. Journalists investigating corporate misconduct suddenly facing tax audits. I whistled softly. That's not just illegal. That's dystopian. Exactly. And when I brought my concerns to my supervisor, he seemed genuinely shocked. He promised to escalate it. Her voice caught. 3 days later, he was found dead in his apartment. Apparent suicide. That's when I knew I had to run. With the evidence. She nodded. I copied everything I could. Enough to prove what they were doing. But now I understand why they're so desperate to stop me. It's not just about Meridian or some government contract. It's about power, the kind that operates in the shadows unchecked. Hope stirred in her arms, making soft cooing sounds. Eliza smiled down at her, a fierce, protective expression. I need to get this evidence to people who can use it. For her sake. For everyone's. I stood, offering my hand. Then let's get to Westfield. She took my hand, rising with newfound determination. Lead the way, Daniel. The walk to Westfield was arduous. We stuck to the edge of the forest, avoiding the main road where Brooks and his men might be searching. Eliza stumbled several times, exhaustion taking its toll, but she never complained. The town was smaller than I'd expected, little more than a main street with a handful of businesses, most closed at this late hour. A neon sign flickered in the distance, Westfield Motel. We need a place to rest, I said. Just for a few hours. Eliza nodded, too tired to argue. How will we pay? I have some cash, but not much. I reached into my pocket, relieved to find my wallet still there. I have about $200. Not much, but enough for a room and maybe a ride tomorrow. The motel was a single-story building with peeling paint and a bored-looking clerk behind the desk. He barely glanced at us as we entered, his attention fixed on a small TV showing a late-night talk show. Need a room? He asked without looking up. Yes, I said. Just for tonight. He pushed a registration card toward me. $50. Cash or card? Cash, I said, pulling out the money. The clerk finally looked at us, his eyes lingering on Eliza and the baby. A flicker of suspicion crossed his face. ID. I hesitated. Left it in the car. It's been a long day. My wife just had a baby, as you can see. We're just looking for a place to rest. His expression softened slightly. Congratulations. Boy or girl? Girl, Eliza said, smiling tiredly. Her name is Hope. The clerk nodded, apparently satisfied. Room 12. End of the row. Got vending machines outside if you're hungry. I took the key he offered, grateful for small mercies. Room 12 was basic but clean, a double bed, a small bathroom, and a rickety table with 2 chairs. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, cradling Hope. I need to clean up, she said, looking down at her dirty clothes. And Hope needs changing. I'll get us some food, I offered. The vending machine should have something. Outside, I took a deep breath of the cool night air. The events of the past 24 hours felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than my ordinary life. How had I gone from being a cab driver to a fugitive in such a short time? I gathered what I could from the vending machines: bottled water, granola bars, chips. Not exactly a feast, but better than nothing. As I walked back to the room, I noticed a newspaper box near the motel office. The headline caught my eye: Tech Executive Found Dead in Apparent Suicide. I fished out a quarter and bought the paper. The story was brief. Maxwell Bennett, CEO of Meridian Technologies, had been found dead in his Chicago apartment that morning. Police were investigating, but initial reports suggested suicide. My blood ran cold. This couldn't be a coincidence. When I returned to the room, Eliza was sitting on the bed, freshly showered, with Hope sleeping beside her. She'd washed her hospital scrubs in the sink and hung them to dry. I found something, I said, handing her the newspaper. She read the headline, her face draining of color. Max is dead. You knew him. He was my boss. The CEO. Her hands trembled as she read the article. This isn't suicide. This is them cleaning house. Making sure no one can corroborate my story. I sat beside her, the bed creaking under our weight. Eliza, this is getting more dangerous by the minute. Maybe we should go to the police. The real police. She shook her head vehemently. No. We don't know who's compromised. These people, they have reach. Influence. Our only chance is to get the evidence to Catherine. She has contacts in the media, in Congress. People who can protect us while the story breaks. I wanted to argue, but the determination in her eyes stopped me. This woman had risked everything, her career, her safety, her life, to expose the truth. Who was I to suggest she abandon that mission now? How far is Belmont from here? I asked instead. About 30 miles west, she said. We were supposed to meet Catherine at Maggie's diner at noon today, but obviously that didn't happen. I need to contact her, let her know we're still coming. No phones, I reminded her. They can track us. Eliza thought for a moment. There's a protocol. If I miss a meeting, Catherine waits 24 hours at the same location. After that, we have alternative rendezvous points. So she'll be at Maggie's diner until noon tomorrow? Yes. If we can get there. I stood, pacing the small room. We need transportation. Something they won't be looking for. I have some cash, Eliza offered. Maybe enough for bus tickets? Too risky. They'll be watching the bus stations. I thought for a moment. What about a local? Someone with a car who might be willing to drive us for a fee. Eliza's eyes lit up. The clerk. He seemed sympathetic. Maybe he knows someone. It was a long shot, but worth trying. I left Eliza with hope and returned to the motel office. The clerk, whose name tag read Mac, was still watching TV, though he'd switched to a late-night movie. Excuse me, I said. I was wondering if you could help us out. My wife and I need to get to Belmont tomorrow. Car trouble, you know? Is there anyone in town who might be willing to drive us? For a fee, of course. Mac considered this. Belmont, huh? That's a ways. My cousin Terry has a car service of sorts. Drives people to the airport, that kind of thing. He might do it. Can you call him? Ask what he'd charge. Mac nodded, reaching for the phone. After a brief conversation, he hung up. Terry says he can do it for $150. Says he'll be here at 8 tomorrow morning. Relief washed over me. That's perfect. Thank you. Back in the room, I relayed the good news to Eliza. She'd laid hope in a makeshift bassinet constructed from a drawer padded with towels. We should try to sleep, she said. Tomorrow will be another long day. I nodded, suddenly aware of my own exhaustion. It had been nearly 48 hours since I'd had proper rest, and the events of the day had drained me completely. I'll take the floor, I offered. Eliza shook her head. Don't be ridiculous. The bed is plenty big enough. She was right, of course, but it felt strange, intimate in a way that highlighted how quickly our lives had become entangled. Nevertheless, I lay down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. Thank you, Daniel, she whispered in the darkness. For everything. Try to get some sleep, I replied, unsure how to respond to her gratitude. As exhausted as I was, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, listening to Eliza's breathing slow and deepen as she drifted off. My mind raced with questions and fears. Had I made a terrible mistake involving myself in this? Was I putting Eliza and Hope in more danger by helping them? And what would happen if we reached Catherine? I must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing I knew, early morning light was filtering through the thin curtains. Eliza was already awake, feeding Hope. Morning, she said softly. You were talking in your sleep. I sat up, rubbing my face. Saying what? Something about being careful. Warning someone. She smiled slightly. Even in your sleep, you're trying to protect people. Before I could respond, a sharp knock at the door made us both freeze. Eliza clutched Hope tighter, fear flashing across her face. Mr. Reeves, a voice called. Terry's car service. Your ride to Belmont is here. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That's our driver. Earlier than expected. I opened the door to find a man in his 50s with a weathered face and kind eyes. Max said you folks needed a ride to Belmont? I'm Terry. That's right, I said. Give us a few minutes to get ready? Terry nodded. I'll wait in the car. Blue Chevy out front. We gathered our few belongings quickly. Eliza changed Hope's makeshift diaper using a towel and safety pins from the motel's sewing kit. I checked outside for any sign of Brooks or his men, but the parking lot was empty except for Terry's car and a couple of trucks. Ready? I asked Eliza. She nodded, cradling Hope against her chest. As I'll ever be. Terry's car was an older model Chevy Impala, clean but well used. He opened the back door for Eliza and Hope, then gestured for me to take the front passenger seat. No car seat for the little one, he commented as we settled in. Not exactly legal. It's been a challenging few days, I said, hoping he wouldn't press the issue. Terry seemed to sense our unease. None of my business, he said, starting the engine. Belmont's about an hour from here. You folks have an address or just the town? Maggie's Diner, Eliza said from the back seat. On Main Street. Know it well, Terry replied. Best pie in 3 counties. As we pulled out of the motel parking lot, I scanned the road in both directions. No black SUVs, no men in suits. For now at least, we seemed to be in the clear. The drive to Belmont was uneventful, passing through rolling farmland and small towns. Terry made occasional conversation, but mostly left us to our thoughts. Eliza dozed in the back seat, exhaustion still evident on her face. Your wife just had the baby? Terry asked quietly, glancing in the rearview mirror. Yesterday, I confirmed, sticking to our cover story. Terry whistled softly. She's a tough one. My Sandra was in bed for a week after our first. I nodded, uncomfortable with the lie but recognizing its necessity. She's remarkable. Must be important, this trip to Belmont, Terry commented. To travel so soon after. Family emergency, I said vaguely. Her sister's expecting us. Terry nodded, accepting this without question. Almost there now? About 10 minutes to Maggie's. I closed my eyes briefly, relief washing over me. We were almost at the rendezvous point. Soon, Eliza and Hope would be with Catherine, protected while the evidence was publicized. And I could return to my life, though I knew it would never be quite the same again. Belmont proved to be larger than Westfield, with a proper downtown area and actual traffic. Terry navigated the streets with the confidence of familiarity, pulling up in front of a classic American diner, a red booths visible through large windows, a neon sign announcing Maggie's in curling script. Here we are, Terry said. Want me to wait? I can give you folks a ride back when you're done. No need, I said, paying him the agreed-upon fee plus a generous tip. Her sister will drive us back. Terry nodded, handing me a business card. Well, if you need me again, give a call. Mac knows how to reach me. We watched as Terry drove away, then turned to face the diner. It was nearly 11 a.m., an hour before the scheduled rendezvous time. Let's get inside, Eliza said, scanning the street nervously. Catherine might already be there. Maggie's Diner was half full, the lunch crowd starting to arrive. A waitress showed us to a booth near the back, eyeing Hope with a smile. Coffee for you both, she asked. Please, I replied. And water. Eliza sat with her back to the wall, positioning herself to see the door. Her eyes scanned every patron, searching for Catherine. What does she look like? I asked quietly. Mid-40s, blonde hair, usually wears business attire. Professional looking. Eliza's eyes continued their sweep of the diner. I don't see her yet. We ordered food. Eliza needed the nourishment after her ordeal and ate in tense silence, watching the door. Each time it opened, Eliza would straighten only to slump back in disappointment. Noon came and went. The lunch crowd thinned and still no sign of Catherine. Something's wrong, Eliza said finally, her voice tight with worry. She should be here by now. I checked my watch, 12:45 p.m. Maybe she's running late. Traffic or something. But I didn't believe it, and neither did Eliza. The tension in her shoulders told me she was thinking the same thing I was. They'd gotten to Catherine somehow. We should leave, I said. Find another way to contact her. Eliza was about to respond when the diner door opened again. A woman entered, blonde, professional-looking, carrying a briefcase. Eliza's face lit up with recognition. That's her, she whispered. Catherine spotted us immediately, relief washing over her face. She walked quickly to her booth, sliding in beside Eliza. Thank God, she said softly. I was beginning to think you weren't coming. Eliza introduced me briefly, then asked the question that had been hanging in the air, what took you so long? Catherine's expression darkened. They found my office. Ransacked it last night. I had to make sure I wasn't followed here. Cold fear gripped me. Were you? Catherine shook her head. I don't think so. I took precautions. She looked at Hope, her face softening. The baby's here. That complicates things. This is Hope, Eliza said, a protective edge to her voice. And she goes where I go. Of course, Catherine agreed quickly. But we need to adjust our plans. The safe house in Minneapolis, I don't think it's safe anymore. Too many people knew about it. Eliza's face fell. Then where? I have a colleague in Seattle. He's prepared to help. Catherine pulled out her phone, checking something. There's a flight from Chicago tonight. If we can get you on it. No airports, I interrupted. They'll be watching them all. Catherine considered this. You're right. We'll have to drive. It's longer, but safer. Hope began to fuss, and Eliza rocked her gently. How long will we need to hide? Before the story breaks. A week, maybe 2. We need to verify your evidence, prepare a comprehensive report. Then we release it to multiple outlets simultaneously. Once it's public, they can't bury it. I listened to them plan, feeling increasingly like an outsider. This was their world now: legal strategies, media contacts, safe houses. Not mine. Once they left for Seattle, my part in this strange drama would be over. The thought brought a surprising pang of loss. Daniel? Eliza's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Catherine was asking if you'd be coming with us to Seattle. I blinked in surprise. Me? No, I should get back to Chicago. My job, my life. Catherine's expression was grave. Mr. Reeves, I'm not sure that's possible anymore. They know you helped Eliza. They'll be watching you, waiting for you to lead them to her. The reality of my situation hit me anew. I couldn't just walk away from this. I was involved now, whether I liked it or not. For how long? I asked, my voice hoarse. Until the story breaks, Catherine said. Until they have bigger problems than finding you or Eliza. 2 weeks, maybe more. 2 weeks away from my life, my job. But what choice did I have? Going back to Chicago now would put not only myself at risk, but Eliza and Hope as well. Okay, I said finally. Seattle it is. Relief flooded Eliza's face. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. Thank you. Catherine stood. We should go. My car's around back. We'll need to drive straight through, taking turns at the wheel. It's about 30 hours to Seattle. We paid for our meal and followed Catherine through the kitchen and out the back door of the diner where a nondescript sedan was parked. As Catherine unlocked it, I took one last look around the quiet alley, a strange sense of finality washing over me. This was it. No turning back now. Daniel, Eliza said softly beside me. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. I looked at her, at the baby in her arms, and thought about the evidence she carried, proof of corruption that reached into the highest levels of power. I thought about Brooks and his men with their guns and threats. And I thought about that rainy night when I'd made the choice to stop for a woman in need. I'm coming, I said firmly. All the way. As we drove out of Belmont heading west toward Seattle and whatever awaited us there, I watched the town fade in the rearview mirror. For better or worse, my life had irrevocably changed the moment I spotted Eliza on that rainy roadside. I didn't know what the future held, what dangers or challenges lay ahead. But I did know one thing with absolute certainty: I'd made the right choice. Not just for Eliza and Hope, but for myself as well. Because sometimes the right path isn't the easy one. Sometimes it leads you away from everything familiar, into uncertainty and risk. But it's the path that lets you look in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. I had been a taxi driver, picking up and dropping off strangers without getting involved in their lives. Now I was something else, something I didn't yet have a name for. But as I glanced at Eliza and Hope, sleeping peacefully in the back seat, I knew I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. The last fare of my taxi driving career had turned out to be the most important one of my life. And wherever this road led us, I was ready to follow it to the end.